budget insurance. Affordable because you can't afford not to.
Hello and welcome to the inside of the Cars.co.za studio. As you might have noticed, I'm not in a car. Now recently we released a video on the Mercedes G-Wagon, and while it was a lot of fun and we went a lot of sideways, in fact actually Mr. Editor, could you please insert a sideways slow-mo shot now? I'll wait. So while I did have a lot of fun going sideways in the G-Wagon, it wasn't exactly a useful review, which is something we pride ourselves on at Cars.co.za. And so this video, this follow-up, is a more practical, more useful, more informative review on the Mercedes-Benz G-Class. Theme song. Okay. Now the official name of this Mercedes G-Class G400D is the Stronger Than Time Edition. And I didn't mention that in the first video because it is a terrible name and I didn't want to mention it. It's actually quite awful. But it is important to remember that this is an entirely new generation of G-Class, but you might be struggling to tell the generation before from this one that's just come out. Mercedes purposefully didn't mess with the design, but the easiest way to tell the two apart is by looking at the headlights and the tail lights. So if you take a look at the headlights and you look at the surrounds, they're a bit softer, they're a bit more swept back down the sides of the car. And of course the headlights are much more modern and they have an LED ring light, which means that you can't leave this car around influencers because they will just immediately start taking selfies. And if you look at the tail lights, they're also much more softer design. On the previous generation, the tail lights protruded from the bodywork. With the new generation, they're much more inset. Other than that, especially in profile, it's extremely difficult to tell the two cars apart. Even the spare wheel cover has been carried over from the previous generation. But this is now a very iconic shape, and personally, I'm actually really glad that Mercedes-Benz didn't mess with the formula. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about the G-Wagon is how solid it feels. In an era where cars feel built to a price and a little bit brittle, the G-Wagon feels like it was carved out of a solid piece of granite. And one of the things we didn't actually show you in that original video, one of the scenes we actually cut out, was me demonstrating just how hard you have to slam the doors to get them to close. Ah, that is just so wonderfully solid. Now, another important thing I didn't get to talk about in that original G-Wagon Strip Club to the Dakar video, which if you haven't watched, you absolutely must check it out, is what it's like to drive the G-Wagon G400D on tarmac. Mercedes-Benz only actually carried over 5 parts from the previous generation to this new one. And they're not exactly the most critical parts. They are the sun visor, the headlight washer nozzles, the spare wheel cover, the push button on the door, and a fifth thing, which I've forgotten about and will now look at my notes to confirm. The tow bar! They forgot the tow bar. There we go. Okay, cut. The reality is that this Geländewagen has been re-engineered from the ground up, and one of the most important changes to on-road dynamics has been to the steering system. Now, for the entire history of this car, it's used something called a recirculating ball system. It dates back to 1979, and it was about as vague as a Peter de Villiers press conference. Thankfully, the new generation has a fully electric setup, and it's really clever. It gets lighter at low speeds, so it's easier to park the car, and heavier at high speeds, so it's easier to cruise on highways. And it is much more direct, and what it does is make you feel that you're much more in control of the car, which is nice because you are controlling a 2.5-ton missile. So this is the slowest G-Wagon you can buy, and even so it will do 0 to 100 in 6.6 seconds. Now, to contextualize that, this car weighs the same as 2 Golf GTIs. 2, not 4, 2. And the feeling of 2.5 tons moving that quickly is pretty incredible and actually a little bit addictive. Now it's really easy to forget that the G-Wagon rides on a ladder frame chassis. Now manufacturers go with ladder frame chassis when it comes to 4x4 applications. So you'll find this kind of chassis underneath any bucky or pickup if you're watching from the overseas, or something like a Toyota Prado or a Ford Everest. The thing is, ladder frame chassis are super tough. They're pretty much indestructible, and they also help increase tow rating, which is what people are looking for when they buy something like a bucky. Now, interestingly, the Land Rover Defender, the new one, has ditched the ladder frame chassis, and instead Land Rover have opted for a strengthened monocoque. This means that it's slightly better to drive on tarmac. But to be honest, if you drive the cars back to back, and I have done pretty much recently, it's actually pretty difficult to tell that the new Defender is a monocoque and the new G-Wagon is a ladder frame. The G-Wagon does an incredible job of not only hiding its significant bulk, but convincing you that the car can actually kind of handle. And a lot of that is thanks to some really clever tech. Now, this kind of tech has been around for a while, but it's the first time it's been implemented in a G-Wagon, and it is called adaptive suspension. I took the car to one of my favorite twisty roads and I was throwing it around, and I was really impressed by what that 2.5 ton behemoth could do. It's really easy to induce tire squeal, but I suppose that's thanks to the weight and thanks to the height of the car, but it does feel like a competent car to drive on road, and it probably means that the AMG versions will be a bit less scary to drive than the previous generation. One of the noticeable downsides about driving a G-Wagon in the city is that the turning circle is terrible. And this is largely down to the fact that it has 3 diffs, one on the front axle, one in the middle, one on the rear axle. Now this makes it an excellent off-roader. It's actually quite a rare setup nowadays. For instance, the Land Rover Defender again has ditched the front diff, which is pretty interesting. But what it means is that the G-Wagon has the turning circle of a moon. And yes, I realize that that is a Jeremy Clarkson metaphor, but please give me a break. He's been doing this for like 40 years and he stole all the good metaphors. Anyway, so the G-Class, it's a car which has stood the test of time. And like I said in our first video about the car, long may it live. I mean, the thing is called the Geländewagen. That's not a very sexy name. It sounds like a province in Germany somewhere. But even so, it's become a status symbol, and I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because the G-Wagon was so expensive, it became a way of flashing your wealth. And now that it is a status symbol, Mercedes-Benz can pretty much charge whatever the hell they want for it. And so a 2.9 million rand for what is the cheapest G-Class you can buy, that is double what the most expensive new Land Rover Defender costs on the South African market. And sure, the G-Class's interior is worlds ahead, way more luxurious than the Defenders, but that is a pretty hefty premium to pay. But you just get the feeling that the people who buy Mercedes-Benz G-Classes don't care about the price, and neither does Mercedes-Benz. And that is a very good business model indeed, which means that the G-Class should be with us for a very long time to come. And I, for one, am pretty happy about that. Now, before we check out, a couple of things I gotta tell you. This t-shirt that I'm wearing and many others like it are for sale on the Cars.co.za shop. Simply head over to Cars.co.za/shop. The link's in the description below, but that's not very hard to remember, is it? And we've got a huge range of custom prints and merchandise t-shirts which you can give as gifts, or just buy it for yourself, you know, treat yourself. It's been a difficult year. Get yourself something nice. And of course, we'd love it if you subscribe to our channel. It'd be great to have you on board. Go and check out all the other hundreds of videos we have. Loads of car reviews, drag races. I'm sure you'll find something that you really like in there. We'd love to hear what you think of the G-Wagon in the comments below. And we'd also love to hear from you. Tell us which new car you'd like us to review next on the channel. Thanks very much for watching. Be safe. Cheers.
Budget insurance. Affordable because you can't afford not to.